Greetings, one and all. My name is Dr. Jonathan Ellerby. I am the two-time best-selling author of the books Return to the Sacred and Inspiration Deficit Disorder. I've done some other books. And my PhD is in comparative religion with a focus on healing in cultural traditions. So a great focus on indigenous tradition and Eastern tradition. And one of the things that really preoccupies me these days in the time of this worldwide pandemic and the massive call for people to self-quarantine in order to speed our process of moving through this, as they say, to flatten the curve in number of cases, not only to protect, of course, the vulnerable, but to protect us all from the economic consequences and the social challenges and struggles. And what occurs to me is the significance of a paradigm shift and what it feels like to be in the middle of one. By an extraordinary coincidence, one of the most recent great paradigm shifts happened just about 200 years ago. In fact, it was in 1820 when the famous scientist Louis Pasteur was born in France. Of course, he didn't start doing experiments right away, but that was just at the beginning of the time when people even imagined that there might possibly be tiny invisible organisms that could be passed from person to person, causing someone else to be sick or food to go bad and so on. Well, Louis Pasteur became famous for the pasteurization technique, and even though maybe it's a little bit overdone and not everything needs to be pasteurized the way we once thought, there's no question that Louis Pasteur changed the world and was part of a very small group of scientists who initiated a paradigm shift. Now, just to give you a sense of the scope of this, before the days of Louis Pasteur, people thought that if you were sick, it's because you walked through something like a cloud of poison gas. Now, maybe metaphorically we could think that's true, but of course we know that that is now not the case at all. People also thought that other things were to blame, and some of those things were metaphysical, and some of those things were material, but just wildly irrational and things that today we would consider nonsense. However, in the day when Louis Pasteur and his colleagues began to tell people, you're going to need to wash your hands, you're going to need to sanitize your water, doctors who at the time performed surgery with unsterilized equipment, you're going to need to clean your equipment before you do surgery, all that was laughed at. People thought it was ridiculous. Tiny invisible creatures somehow making us sick, somehow communicable in our food, in our water, through our material world. This was madness. And yet, little by little, as he and other scientists of the day began to prove that purified water had vibrant communities around it, and that water that was stagnant and full of clearly polluted conditions, there were more people sick. Little by little, people were finally convinced. Now, the reason why this is an example of a paradigm shift is because all of people's decisions around food and health and humanity were based on the assumption that there was no such thing as tiny invisible creatures that could be transmitted through surfaces and through individuals, coughing, sneezing, touching. Once that was proven, the idea spread like fire around the world. The evidence was quite clear and obvious. The statistics in recovery from surgical procedures went up. People were able to control plagues and other kinds of outbreaks that previously they couldn't even imagine what the source or cause was. And so because of that, all of people's decisions, ideas, and progress relating to health and wellness was based on this foundational shift. Now, when foundational shifts come, they're not easy. So at that time, surgeons had to do things different. People who were preparing foods had to prepare things differently. Businesses had to afford costs that they never previously had to afford. And of course, when people were sick, they had to care for themselves differently and handle their interactions with each other differently. Well, all of this is common sense now. I mean, the reality is young children now know that you need to clean things before you put them in their mouth. You need to clean things when you go to the doctor's office and so on. That's just part of what we teach and part of what's become common sense. But it wasn't then. It was challenged, it was laughed at, and here we are 200 years later. And not only are we thankful that Louis Pasteur and colleagues taught us that if we sterilize things, we can protect ourselves and each other. They taught us that a sneeze in someone's face is not a good thing, and now we're grateful for that knowledge. But of course, that knowledge from 200 years ago is helping us to contain this pandemic. Now, am I just talking about staying inside and not sneezing on people and the kind of stuff that we've been hearing nonstop all day? No, my point is that what's happening right now is potentially a stimulus, a push for a worldwide paradigm shift. Now, in any paradigm shift, not everyone's going to get it right away, and it's always going to take time. The only question that matters is whether you personally are going to get involved, whether you personally want to be a part of the paradigm shift. The shift that we are facing right now is one from a consciousness that is competitive, comparative, linear, hierarchical, and what you might even call masculine in its consciousness and style, to one that is collaborative, unitive, collective, community-oriented, and one that might be called feminine in nature. The basic idea is that if we are going to thrive in the face of this crisis, the new paradigm rules and tools are going to take us a long way. And the old paradigm rules and tools are going to lead us to despair, distress, and in some cases, disaster and destruction. The very closing of borders, the very lack of sharing scientific information and medical resources already coming at a huge cost to us. But we're starting to see new things show up. We're starting to see what some people are calling an epidemic of kindness. We're seeing people share resources. We're seeing people go beyond what governments are asking and taking it upon themselves to not only limit their activity for the benefit of others, but to use their quiet time, their alone time, their home time, essentially for spiritual practice. If we apply the principles of mindfulness, meditation, prayer, reflection, deep listening, and learning to experience the beauty of the world as it is, even when we don't like it, then we can awaken through this time to a totally different way of being, a way that we will carry with ourselves no matter what we face, whether it's job loss, relationship loss, health challenges, injury. The very opportunity presented to us now is an acceleration of all the challenging lessons that our teachers and masters and mystics and sages have been forwarding to us for hundreds of years. Right now, we have a chance to wake up as a world. And what that looks like for you is that you use this time not to fret, not to stress, not to focus on things you can't control, but to practice truly being in the moment, to take time to be with those who you can be with, to release the attachment, to be with those people who you can't, and to remember that no matter what condition you are in, you are never, never alone. Not only do we have social media as a way to connect us, but we forget that we have spirit. Every day, in every moment, and whether you call it God or source or consciousness or angels or ancestors, it doesn't matter to me. The bottom line is, the more we slow down, the more we learn to listen, the more we realize that everything that's being taken away from us was just a distraction from the ultimate truth. You see, each paradigm shift is really an advancement, an evolution in human understanding. It's not when we're all convinced of something that's ultimately not true for everyone or not successful for everyone. Each paradigm shift allows us all to function at a greater level of wellness, a greater level of resilience. And what makes a paradigm shift true is the fact that life itself proves it out. We see the results of the shift. And those of us that have already begun to adopt and adapt to a mindful way of living, a community-centered way of living, a heart-centered way of living, are already experiencing the beauty and the benefits of this paradigm, of this worldview. And so the invitation to you right now is to consider this a great opportunity. Now, you don't have to, but let's face it, it's on you. So why not take this as a moment to discover something new in yourself and the world? How do you do that? Develop a daily time to really slow down. In the middle of this great slowing down of society, slow down inside yourself. Unplug for a little bit. Walk for a little bit. Meditate for a little bit. And just listen to whatever you feel might guide you. There are answers. There is love and wisdom no matter what is taken away from us. Also, to help at the Althea Center in Denver, we have 2 weekly live events. So Thursday at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, I will be doing a deep dive live into some stay-at-home tools for people in quarantine or self-quarantine. And we will also do question and answer. And then on Sunday at 10:30 a.m. Mountain Time USA, I will also be doing a session, although this will start with a guided meditation, then a message, and then finally a shorter question and answer. So these are some opportunities you have through the Althea Center. For people who follow my personal Facebook page and my personal email list, I will have some other opportunities coming up so that we can meet weekly in smaller groups. But wherever you are, whatever your belief or background is, consider this worldwide wake-up call and the fact that this might be one of the most extraordinary opportunities of your life to finally live with the fullness, the grace, the acceptance, and the peace that you have always longed for. It is possible, and we can do this together. So thank you, and I'm going to shut you off now. See you soon.